Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to yet another episode of the ACSS news broadcast on sanctions against Russia. We're trying to make sense about what's going on in the world of sanctions, and we'll guide you through what has happened today or in previous days and why it matters for your business. My name is Saskia Rietbroek, and I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Certified Sanction Specialists. And I'm coming to you live from Maastricht in the Netherlands. And I hope if you're not a member, that you all become members of ACSS. So please visit our website at sanctionsassociation.org. So, in this broadcast, once again, we'll provide you a summary of some of the latest developments resulting from the ongoing conflict in the Ukraine. And we primarily focus on US, UK, and EU sanctions. So I just checked, and no new sanctions today against Russia from OFAC, OFSI, or the European Union. But there was an important development last week, and I wanted to go into it a little bit more in detail, like I mentioned yesterday. So this is about the aggregation requirements with regards to ownership. So let's take a look what happened. The EU last week published an FAQ, it's like 27 pages, on a variety of topics related to sanctions. And one of the things that this FAQ mentions is the aggregation. It says that now, if the aggregated ownership of a company by a listed person meets the 50% threshold, then this company should be considered jointly owned and controlled by designated persons. This was not the case previously. We do know that OFAC has this, right? This aggregation requirement, but the EU didn't have this. So, and they provide a couple of examples which are pretty straightforward. If one listed person owns 30% of a company and another listed person owns 25% of the company, then dealings with this company could be considered as making funds indirectly available to those listed persons. So, another example, if you have 10 listed persons, each with 10% of the company, then this company would also be off limits. So you basically have to add up the shares of these different designated persons to come up with the percentage. And like I said, for those of you in the US, OFAC has been aggregating ownership percentages since 2014. There are some differences on another, element, because OFAC just looks at ownership and not control. So the EU, in its newly posted guidance, also clarify how this works with sanctioned banks, and they give a couple of examples there as well. So I think this is pretty impactful because, if you are working in a bank, you have to reevaluate your know your customer files and take a look if companies that previously were not considered to be off limits are now off limits because of this aggregation test. And of course, don't forget the control test, right? The control test refers to factual elements. Here you can think of voting rights, power to appoint company leadership or management, for example. And this is a really difficult test because you really have to look at it case by case. But if any of these criteria of control are satisfied, it is considered that the legal person or entity is controlled by another person or entity, and that means that the entity is sanctioned as well. So this has, big compliance consequences. So I just wanted to reiterate this new FAQ that came out last week, I think on Friday. So let's take a look at the UK. What have they done? The UK actually on this topic, they also updated their guidance also last week. So they updated the guidance on ownership and control. So wow, that's great. Would you think, right? Uh, Not so great because it's kind of complicated here. So just like in the EU, if a person or entity is on the UK sanctions list, their assets will be frozen, and this extends to the assets that are owned or controlled directly or indirectly by the designated person. But here it comes. This new guidance says that when making an assessment on ownership and control, you cannot just simply aggregate the different designated persons' shares in a company unless the shares or the rights are subject to some sort of joint arrangement between the designated parties, or one party controls the right of another. So this makes it more complicated, I think. OFSI basically said that it does not aggregate different designated persons' holdings in a company unless there is some sort of evidence of a joint arrangement, that that they sort of work together, or that these shares are held jointly. So anyone that's that is this guidance from the UK. I think it creates more complexity for diligence and compliance efforts, and it will be difficult under most circumstances, I would think, for unrelated third parties to have access to these corporate governance documents, right? To determine if there's some sort of block, some sort of joint arrangement that these people are working together. And this is even harder when companies have been incorporated in like offshore tax havens, with limited, transparency with regards to ultimate ownership and control. So this is not that easy. At the same time, the UK government has also announced that sanctions violations will be treated by a strict liability standard. So this puts a compliance officer or a business owner, again, in a difficult position because you may have not enough information, right, to confirm that, whether this aggregation applies or not. But in the meantime, you're held responsible anyway. Just as a side note, in the EU, this is a little bit different. So EU sanctions exclude liability if a person did not know or had no reasonable cause to suspect that their actions would infringe sanctions. So yeah, there's that. But there's always this. You are expected in any case to conduct due diligence, right? Reasonable due diligence based on all readily available information, to ensure that you're not violating sanctions. So in order to stay out of trouble with your local regulator, as part of your due diligence, you must really, be carefully doing your know your customer duty, screen these counterparties and their ultimate beneficial owners, and now, make sure that you're aggregating these ownerships against the EU assets, to make sure that you're not dealing with a company that is listed. So it's not an easy task, and I understand that several banks are now going through this exercise to reevaluate their KYC files, to look at this aggregation factor, to see if now companies are off limits because of the multiple designated parties have an ownership or control, and now they are considered to be sanctioned as well. So this was it for today's update, and I want to check if there's any questions on LinkedIn. So let me just see. This was it for today's update. Oh, that was an older one. So let's see. Let me ask my colleague if you see any questions there in the chat. All right. No questions for today. And tomorrow I will not be doing this broadcast, but my colleague Alex Witt, you'll be in good hands with him. And he's going to be covering more like the export control, give you an export control update related to Russia restrictions. And so he'll be joining you tomorrow at the same time. So I look forward to that presentation. And see you all. I'll be back on Thursday again with another update. So thank you all and see you then. Bye-bye.